Hey YouTube, Appalachian ADV Rider here, bringing another knife first impressions. I'm just going to warn you right now, I am a Les George fan. I just love his knives. There's a reason I love him. It's well-deserved love, but just so you know, if you're waiting to my opinion about this knife, I love it. Okay? And I also like bigger size knives. So this is a bigger knife. This is a Les George VECP. It's a button lock in Magna Cut. Just typical Les George sharpness. It's razor sharp. This is a morph scale. That's what he calls it. It's a titanium with the morph pattern in it. Let's go ahead and see what size this is. So this is an 8.5-inch knife. Let me move it over. There you go. Sorry about that, guys. This is an 8.5-inch knife. And this is my first button lock. Oh, before I go into that, let me just pull it up here. Show you this knife. Isn't that beautiful? I love Les George. So anyway, this is my first button lock. And it's very awkward to try to do this on camera, but it is brand new. So, and it's a washer knife, has a washer and a pivot, phosphor bronze washers. So it's not going to be completely drop shut, especially from the very first day you get it. But so you see I had pressed the button in and flicked this blade in and it bounced back. So this knife does have a tendency of bouncing back. Part of it's because, I haven't let go of the button fast enough. And if I'm holding the button and it closes, it will bounce back. And quite honestly, it might be okay with that, because if I let go of the button, then it's dragging. There's a locking mechanism in here. Let's see if you can see that. Yeah, when you press this button in, you see that plunge there? It goes in. Well, that circular disc rides up against the tang of the blade, and I guess it eventually wear it out. I don't know. I haven't gotten to the point where I could just exactly time it right, and I'm just really not worried about it. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not worried about it. But you have to be aware that when you do this, the knife will bounce back out. So you can fling it out, which is difficult to do here, but you can also fling it in. This knife has a very clicky sound, but it's a subdued click, because the engagement, the locking engagement, is just this pin dropping down into position. So it's just like if you can hear that, it's all you're really going to hear. It has a beautiful slow roll to this knife. So you open it up, and I don't know if you heard that. That's such a muted sound, but man, that is just a beautiful action there. Slow rolling it. Love it. And sorry about that, guys. It has all the cues of a Les George design. This handle, the shape of it, everything's extremely chamfered. That's one thing about Les George. When he makes a knife, everything comes in and there is not a sharp corner anywhere. So this button lock here is somewhat symmetrical, except on this side, this thing is sticking out further than this button. So this button is sticking out further than that button. But this is just an encasement for the mechanisms. There's probably a spring back there, I would imagine, and this thing. So when you push this button in, it goes into this area. But so it's somewhat symmetrical. I like it. I mean, I like it. It's a button lock knife. He's done even like the pivot. This is what I love about Les George. Look at the attention to detail. I don't know if you can see all this tiny milling here. Yeah, catch the light. And on the other side, there's no milling there. But all this tiny milling over here. And then the collar of the pivot is raised to be separate from the scale, or maybe it's not. Yeah, it's raised. So that's a nice touch. That's more machining on his end, and it's just attention to detail. So this is, like I said, the morph scale. So he's gone in and cut these grooves into titanium, but everything is rounded. This is a lot of physical labor to get it to be like this, to have this attention to detail. And yet this knife was, if I remember correctly, $450. So not horrible. This has a typical Les George clip. If you ever known any of his knives that he makes personally, this is the clip. I think it never bothers me. That clip is great. I mean, it's from holding it from a hot spot perspective, right? So the first impression when I grabbed this knife, the first impression I got is it's thin. I mean, it's not super thin, but it's thinner than what I've been carrying. Recently I've been carrying my XM knives and with titanium scale, so everything's going to be compared to that weight and thickness. So this is definitely thinner than that, but it's wider. I mean, yeah. So this part here is actually pretty wide, and it's thin. It's got just a beautiful shape. I mean, this is all my opinion, and it's very subjective. So, I mean, if you're looking at it and you don't like it, I respect that. But like I said, I love this designer. I love the attention to detail. I love how everything is smooth. I love the crown on the blade here. You see, like, this is so typical of a Les George knife, where it goes up here and then slants back, and you have the 4 or 3 of these bumps here, jimping, but it's really not very effective jimping at all. I mean, it's not bad. It's certainly there. This thumb stud, it looks removable, so I guess that's good if anybody wants to remove it, because with the button lock, you really don't need, per se, a thumb stud. There is absolutely no play in this knife at all, up or down. It is solid. That's just fantastic to have a somewhat drop shut knife on day one that has phosphor bronze and absolutely no play in the pivot, up, down, left, or right. Wow. This is why I love this guy. Les George does it right. And he is a really nice guy, as opposed to some of the other popular brands that I like, the American brands. I'm not going to mention names, but Les George is an all-around, seems like an amazing guy, loves the industry, loves making knives, is extremely talented. He charges, I think, a very fair price for his product versus competition, his United States competition. So, all right, what else? I love the feel of this knife. So the edge has 2 sides to it. Right? That's attention to detail. That's more work. The nice thing about a button lock, and again, this is my first button lock. I usually have frame locks, is you don't have to worry about, the frame. You don't have to worry about grabbing the frame lock and putting pressure on it with your fingers and squeezing the lock bar into the tang. So that you don't have to worry about. And this is a big knife. That's another thing. I don't know if I said it at the beginning of the video. I wanted to say it, so pardon me if I didn't. But I like a big knife. This is a big knife. I like a heavy knife. Well, let's see. This is not that heavy, but I mean, to me. But let me show you what not that heavy feels to me. So that's ounces. 5.2 ounces. Oops. Or 148 grams. So 5.2 ounces, I'm sure breaks, the ounce per inch rule. Well, let's do the actual measurements too again. So we said it was 8.5. Well, it's under 8.5, but over 8.25. So that's the total length. The blade steel goes to, I'm going to say 3.5 inch from the very crown here, and then the cutting edge is under 3.5, but over 3.25. And it's got a nice sharpening choil here. People talk about this in relation to the plunge grind or whatever. I'm not going to comment about that, but it looks good enough to me, man. I love how he does this swedge. This is a very typical Les George design where he has the full thickness of this blade going down to pretty much here, but he disguises it by swedging the knife. So it looks like, right? It looks like it's getting really thin out here. And I mean, it is thinner, but the thickness of this knife travels from, from the very beginning all the way down to, I'm sure it looks like it's all the way down to somewhere. The point is, it is a really strong tip. It looks like, I'm going to call it a medium strength tip. So I'm going to back up. But still, the point is, it looks thinner than it really is because of this swedge design, and it is thinning out a little bit. And it doesn't look like a hard fixed blade use tip to it, but it's definitely not dainty for sure. So, and this pivot collar, I mean, look at the size of that torque. I mean, that's got to be a T20. I don't have the thing on me. I don't really like talking about specs on the first impression. You can go and look it all up. I just love the look of the way this pivot is. So in reality, it looks like just a regular metal finish to it with swirls in it. But it looks great on the video here. I think that looks really good. Yeah, and this knife has, I guess, because of the mechanism of the ball, the blade has an interesting cutout here. And then when you close it too, it has this, you can see like interesting grooves at the bottom here. So this groove is the blade stop. So you close that, and that's the blade stop. And then the other one, what is the other one? I didn't try to, that's where, I guess that's where the ball comes out. This thing, the button lock. It must go right into that spot. It barely moves. Oh, because that's the other side. It barely moves, but it still barely moves when it goes in there. It's kind of weird. So, and this doesn't have a detent ball for a button lock. So let's see, it's not that hard to pull it out, but it's not going to just fly out. So I like that. I just love Les George knives. This is very interesting for me. So I'm learning a lot. This is the first time I'm holding this knife or looking at it as the recording of this video. And so it's more of an exploratory video for me than anything else. It's a first impression, right? I mean, this knife is perfectly centered. I mean, that's just real typical of Les George. He just makes a great knife. They talk about the Holy Trinity and, Chris Reeves and Hinderer and Strider. Now, I don't have much experience with Strider. I know there's controversy around him. I held this knife, one of the knives, one time I opened it. I really enjoyed it. So, but I don't have that knife. I really can't speak to it. But I have both a bunch of Hinderers and several Chris Reeves and several Les George. Les George is better than at least those two that I'm very familiar with. And And I'm just going to leave it at that. I think Strider has some really cool custom designs, but I don't even want to get into it. I don't know much about Strider, but this is definitely it's never was part of the Holy Trinity, but I think it's in a class of itself. It should be like less George and then the Trinity below it. But so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I am just, you can call me a fanboy, I don't know, but he deserves every bit of praise that he's earned from me, in my opinion. Just everything is just so chamfered. You have no clue how much time that takes to make sure when a knife leaves his shop, it's perfect. And maybe I just got lucky, but I have a few less George knives, so I've got lucky many, many times. All right, well, so that's a first impression. What? So this is a larger knife. It's over 8.5 inches. I'm not going to compare it to anything else because at this point, I think everybody kind of knows their ideal knife size. So for me, it's in the high sevens. Anything from 7.5 up to even 9 inches. That's the kind of knife I like. So this is 8.25. If you don't like big knives, you're not going to like this. If you like, between 7.5 and 9 inches, you just might love this knife like I do. This has such great ergonomics, even though it's thin. And I guess it's thin because it's they're trying to reduce some weight. I mean, if you look in here, there is some weight reduction inside the scale. So, I mean, 5.2 ounces is not very heavy. I definitely had heavier knives. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap this up. Listen, Les George, he can't do anything wrong as far as I'm concerned. I love the guy. I love his knives. I'm not going to apologize for that. So, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and like this video, or if you didn't like it, do thumbs down, right? And I will talk to you again. I really enjoyed this, and I have a lot more content coming, and I will talk to you soon.